You were 8 years old, sitting on the edge of your bed, listening to your parents fight in the next room. The walls shook, voices rose, and you stayed perfectly still, holding your breath, hoping they wouldn't remember you were there. That's how it began, not with violence, not with words, but with silence. The moment you learned that the safest place to be was invisible. You didn't plan to disappear, it just happened. Piece by piece. Each time you were ignored, you spoke a little softer. Each time you were scolded for making things worse, you learned that your feelings were dangerous. And so, you folded yourself smaller and smaller, until you became the quietest person in the room. Some nights, it wasn't the shouting that scared you, it was the control. The way your mother corrected how you sat at the dinner table, how your father frowned when you didn't smile on command. You learned to watch their faces before you spoke, to measure every word against the weather in the room. If they were angry, you disappeared faster. If they were calm, you stayed silent anyway, just in case. They didn't need to hit you to teach you obedience. Their disapproval was enough. Their silence was louder than punishment. And so you grew up believing that love had rules, that peace was earned through perfection, and that being yourself was somehow too much. Psychologists call this adaptive invisibility, a survival response formed in homes where control replaces care and love feels conditional. Dr. Janice Webb, author of Running on Empty, writes that emotionally neglected children learn that their feelings don't matter, and eventually they stop feeling them altogether. That's how the lost child begins, not out of rebellion, but retreat. You became the one who never asked for help, who smiled when sad, who learned that being easy was safer than being real. People praised you for being so calm, so mature, so independent, but no one asked what it cost you to be that way. Behind that calmness grew a quiet ache, a sense that you were both present and absent in your own life. You learned to survive by staying out of sight, by reading the room instead of being in it. Years later, that pattern still follows you. You walk into a room and feel like you don't belong. You overthink every word you say. You feel disconnected from people you love and from the person you used to be. You've built a life that looks stable, a job, a home, maybe even success, but inside, something still feels missing. That emptiness isn't weakness. It's the echo of a child who once believed that being quiet was the only way to stay safe. Somewhere along the way, you learnt to trade being seen for being safe, honesty for harmony, truth for survival. And that trade has shaped everything: how you trust, how you love, how you see yourself. But here's the truth. The child who disappeared to survive never really left. They've just been waiting for you to turn toward them and say, "You don't have to hide anymore. You're safe now." It takes years to realize disappearing was something you learned, not who you are. You called it being quiet, preferring peace, but peace never felt peaceful. It felt like holding your breath. You tiptoed through life, afraid to disturb the room. You read faces before they spoke, apologized before anyone was upset, built whole relationships on anticipation instead of connection. Controlling homes teach one lesson: safety depends on predicting danger. So you tuned your senses to the smallest sigh, the softest shift in tone. That's hypervigilance, a survival alert that won't turn off. A 2018 study in development and psychopathology found kids in emotionally unpredictable environments show increased amygdala activity, threat detection, and reduced activity in regions tied to self-expression. The part of you that scans for risk got louder. The part that could be yourself went quiet. We carry that into adulthood, a tension between longing and fear. You want closeness, then flinch when it arrives. Care can feel suspicious. The mind asks, what do they want? The body remembers what the mind forgets. From the outside, you look calm. Inside, it's exhaustion. Years of holding it together turned you into the caretaker who absorbs everyone's pain and ignores your own. You mastered empathy, but not boundaries. Somewhere, the quiet child still believes being needed is the only way to be loved. So loneliness feels safer than intimacy. Silence easier than honesty. Each time you start to speak, an old echo warns, careful, you smile. You shrink, you change the subject. But truth doesn't vanish. It waits in your chest until you finally say, I'm tired of being the quiet one. Carl Rogers wrote, when I accept myself just as I am, then I can change. Healing starts there, not by forcing volume, but by seeing silence as a response, not an identity. The house that taught you to hide is gone. Your body hasn't gotten the memo. That's the work. Unlearning politeness that erases you. Risk being seen, even with a shaking voice. Ask for what you need without apologizing for needing. Maybe belonging isn't earned by silence, but reclaimed through honesty. This isn't about blame, it's about remembering you survived, and that survival isn't living. You don't have to manage every storm to prove you're good. You already proved it. The lost child doesn't need to disappear anymore. They need permission to exist. Loud, messy, uncertain, human. Maybe healing begins when we stop making ourselves small to fit inside someone else's Calmont build. A peace spacious enough to hold all of who we are. There was a time when silence felt like safety, the same way disappearing felt like belonging. It wasn't rebellion, it was instinct. You learned early that peace was fragile, that even love could turn sharp without warning. So you adapted. You made yourself smaller, quieter, easier to be around. Every unspoken word became a shield. Every careful smile was an act of self-preservation. You weren't trying to hide. You were trying to make life bearable. The lost child is born in that quiet, not from defiance, but from devotion. A child who learns that the less they are, the safer everyone else seems to be. For many of us, that's what childhood meant, existing at the edges of the room, where the shouting sounded softer. We became invisible peacekeepers, holding the family together by erasing ourselves. The stillness we called being good was actually submission. We thought our silence protected us, and in a way, it did. But it also taught us to vanish. Years later, that lesson doesn't fade. It follows us like a ghost. You hesitate before you speak. You soften your opinions. You edit yourself until even your laughter feels rehearsed. You crave connection but flinch when someone looks too closely. Safety, once your sanctuary, has become your loneliness. Psychologist Stephen Porges describes how the body's social engagement system shuts down under threat, leading us to retreat rather than reach out. That instinct for the lost child never resets. It becomes a permanent setting. We grow up biologically prepared to hide. Every tone of voice, every silence, every shift in energy is scanned for danger. It's not that we don't want closeness, it's that our nervous system doesn't know how to feel safe inside it. So when love arrives, our body treats it like a warning. The old alarm sounds: don't speak, don't need, don't exist too loudly. We mistake withdrawal for calm, when really it's the quiet of fear disguised as peace. As adults, that conditioning hides behind noble words. We call it independence, self-reliance, professionalism. We say, I'm fine, and mean, I don't trust that you'll stay if I'm not. The lost child becomes the dependable one, the listener, the helper, the person everyone leans on. We build entire identities around being useful, because being needed feels safer than being seen. People call us easy, But ease is the cost of erasure. They don't see the weight we carry after the crowd leaves, the silence that fills the room like a fog. They don't hear the inner voice asking, "Who am I when no one needs me?" Dr. Gabor Mate wrote, "When you have to choose between attachment and authenticity, you will always sacrifice authenticity." That's the tragedy of the lost child. We didn't lose our voices. We buried them for love. We learned that truth was dangerous, that authenticity could break fragile peace. So we traded our aliveness for acceptance. But what looked like harmony was really compliance. Love built on silence isn't love. It's survival in disguise. It teaches you to confuse being tolerated with being valued. And after years of living that way, even kindness feels suspicious. And maybe that's why peace feels so foreign now. The world grows quiet, and instead of calm, you feel your heartbeat quicken. You sit in a gentle room, but can't relax. You feel unseen, even in good company. Because deep inside, the child you once were is still waiting for someone to turn toward them and say, "You can stop disappearing now. You're safe here." But no one else can say that for you. That reassurance has to come from within, from the adult you've become, finally ready to make space for the child you left behind. That's the turning point for the lost child. Understanding that safety built on silence isn't real safety. It's survival extended past its purpose. The armor that once protected you has become the prison that isolates you. The walls you built to keep out chaos now keep out connection. And learning to speak again, to exist fully, to let yourself be felt, that isn't rebellion, it's resurrection. It's the moment you stop ghosting your own life and start stepping into it, shaky but real. So the next time you feel yourself pulling away, notice it. That instinct to withdraw isn't proof you're broken, it's proof you once survived brilliantly, but survival is no longer the goal. You can let the body exhale, you can let yourself stay, even when it feels foreign. You don't have to earn your space by being invisible. You can be present, imperfect, seen, and still be safe. Because the lost child story isn't about disappearance anymore. It's about returning, learning, slowly and tenderly, that being seen and surviving can finally happen in the same breath. There's a certain kind of loneliness that follows us into adulthood, the kind that doesn't come from being alone, but from being unseen. We grow older, take on responsibilities, learn to smile at the right times and call it maturity. But somewhere inside, the child we once were is still waiting to be held, to be heard, to finally matter. We've mastered the art of looking composed while quietly wondering why peace feels so far away. We say we've moved on, yet every argument, every rejection, every silence seems to echo something old, something that began long before we could name it. When I look at us, the so-called adults, I see children who learned too early how to survive. We grew up believing that strength meant not needing anyone. So now we pride ourselves on independence while secretly aching for connection. We tell ourselves we're fine, but our bodies betray us, the tension in our shoulders, the restlessness in our sleep, the way our hearts race when someone raises their voice. It's not immaturity, it's memory. Our nervous systems are still tuned to the same frequency they learned in childhood. Stay alert, stay small, stay safe. Dr. Bruce Perry, a leading expert on childhood trauma, once said that what children experience in their earliest relationships becomes the template for all future relationships. And that's the truth many of us live without realizing. We're not broken, we're patterned. The same fear of conflict that once protected us from chaos now keeps us distant. The same self-restraint that once shielded us from rejection now robs us of closeness. We don't mean to repeat the past, it just repeats through us, quietly, automatically. I think about how often we mistake control for healing. We say, "I've grown up," but really, we've just gotten better at hiding the pain. We manage it through busyness, achievements, emotional walls, anything to prove we're okay. But in quiet moments, that old ache surfaces, the feeling of being there, yet not belonging anywhere. And that's when it hits. We may have aged, but parts of us never got to grow. They're still frozen at the moment we decided silence was safer than being seen. Maybe that's why relationships feel so complicated. We crave closeness, but flinch at intimacy. We want to be understood, but fear exposure. When someone tries to love us, the child inside doesn't feel joy, it feels danger. Because love once meant walking on eggshells, predicting moods, keeping everyone calm. That child still believes that being yourself might cost you connection. So we retreat. We say, I need space, when what we really mean is, I don't know how to be loved without disappearing. But here's what I've learned. Being an adult doesn't mean outgrowing that child. It means turning back for them. It means realizing that the loneliness we feel isn't proof that we're broken. It's proof that some part of us still longs to be met. The goal isn't to erase that longing, but to listen to it. Because beneath all the independence, beneath all the control, there's a voice that's been waiting to say, I'm still here. And maybe that's where the real growing up begins. Not when we leave our past behind, but when we finally stop leaving ourselves behind with it. There's a strange kind of grief that comes after survival, the kind that appears when life finally gets quiet. You look around and realize the danger is gone, but your body still behaves like it's waiting for the next storm. You wake up tired, even on peaceful mornings. You plan every word, even in safe conversations. You smile because that's what you've always done, not because you feel joy. And when someone asks what's wrong, you can't explain it because nothing is happening anymore. That's the hardest part. The pain that shaped you isn't visible. It lives in reflexes, in pauses, in the way you disappear when someone tries to love you too deeply. This is the afterlife of being a lost child, when survival has ended but safety still feels foreign. Your mind knows you're free, but your nervous system hasn't caught up. It's like living in a house that no longer burns, yet still flinching at the smell of smoke. That's what complex trauma does. It teaches you that peace is temporary, that calmness is suspicious. Dr. Janina Fisher, a leading researcher on trauma integration, describes this as the body's loyalty to the past. Your body isn't trying to sabotage you, it's trying to protect you using the only rules it knows. But those rules were written by a frightened child, not the adult you've become. And maybe that's where the real work begins, not in blaming the child who built those defenses, but in gently teaching them new ones. The truth is, we can't logic our way out of trauma. We can't think our way into safety. The body needs to feel that it's safe. That's why the first steps of healing often feel so physical. The deep breath you finally let yourself take, the shaken hands you stop trying to still, the tears you no longer hide. They are the body's language for release. The voice you silenced as a child is speaking again, not through words, but through sensation. For many of us, that's terrifying. We were never taught how to sit with our own emotions. We were taught to tidy them up, to stay polite, to hold everything together. So when sadness comes, we try to manage it. When anger rises, we push it down. When joy flickers, we doubt it. But emotions are not intruders, they are messengers. And healing asks us to listen, not to control. As Dr. Sue Johnson, founder of Emotionally Focused Therapy, explains, we are wired for connection, not perfect. That means our tears, our fear, our longing, none of it makes us broken. It makes us human. It's hard to be human when you've spent years pretending to have everything under control. It can feel risky to cry in front of someone, to admit you need comfort, or to say, I don't know, without feeling ashamed. But those small, honest moments, they're what help you rebuild trust. Not with others first, but with yourself. Every time you let a feeling come and go without judging it, you're teaching your body something new. This feeling won't break me. I can stay. That's what real growth looks like, not forgetting your past, but becoming strong enough to carry it. Then one day, you start to notice tiny shifts. A morning when the silence doesn't feel so heavy. A conversation where you speak before you start overthinking. A night when you finally rest, not because you've done enough, but because you're simply tired. No one else may see these changes, but they matter. Because each small act of choosing to stay, to feel, to be here, that's you slowly taking your life back from survival. The sadness doesn't disappear, it just changes shape. You begin to see that it can exist alongside peace, that you can miss what you never had and still love what you have now. You realize that healing isn't a finish line, it's an ongoing relationship between the person you were, the person you became, and the one you're still learning to be. The lost child inside you doesn't vanish. They'll still get scared sometimes, still look for reassurance. But now, you know how to hold them with care instead of silence. Maybe this is what it means to become whole, not chasing the perfect version of yourself, but allowing the real one to breathe, letting softness and strength exist in the same body. Looking back at the child you once were and saying, "You don't have to protect me anymore, we're safe now." Because in the end, the goal isn't to forget your past. It's to build a life where it no longer decides how small you have to be. Healing isn't about erasing the lost child inside you. It's about bringing them home. And when you finally do, you'll see what was true all along. You were never too quiet to be loved. You were just waiting for love that could finally listen. There comes a moment when the mask you've worn for years begins to crack, and for the first time you realize it's not the world falling apart, it's you finally breaking open. It starts quietly, almost imperceptibly. A missed smile, a tremor in your voice, tears rising at moments that used to leave you cold. The version of you that always held everything together begins to falter. It's frightening, because that mask once saved you. It gave you control, stability, a script to survive by. But the older you get, the heavier it becomes. What once shielded you from pain now blocks you from life itself. We were never taught to see this unraveling as grace. We were taught to fear it, to call it failure, weakness, or falling apart. But what if falling apart is simply what happens when your soul is done pretending? When you've spent years curating composure, the first sign of emotion feels like danger. Yet, as the mask cracks, the truth finally breathes. Beneath all the politeness and self-control lies a self that has been waiting for permission to feel sadness, anger, confusion, joy. Each emotion is a pulse returning to the body that once went numb, just to stay safe. For so long, we confused being good with being silent. We were rewarded for our compliance, praised for our composure. No one asked what it cost to be so calm. But the body keeps its own truth. The heart remembers every swallowed word. The shaking hands, the lump in your throat, those are not signs of weakness. They're memories trying to move through you. Brené Brown said it best: you either walk inside your story and own it, or you stand outside and hustle for your worthiness. The mask cracks when your soul refuses to keep hustling for love. Sometimes it takes heartbreak or sheer exhaustion to wake you up, to make you realize that the version of yourself who survived no longer fits the life you're trying to live. But that realization hurts. Without the mask, you feel exposed, raw, uncertain. Vulnerability feels like standing in the open without armor. You confuse it for fragility, but it's actually your first taste of freedom. The freedom to feel without editing, to exist without performing. When the mask breaks, you don't lose yourself. You meet yourself. You start to see how much effort it took to appear fine. You recognize how much of your calm was actually suppression. That awareness burns, but it also illuminates. Because honesty, even when it hurts, is where life begins again. It's where you stop existing for approval and start breathing for yourself. Not everyone will understand this change. Some will miss the old you, the one who never disagreed, never cried, never made them uncomfortable. But others will stay. They'll see the real you emerging through the cracks, the unfiltered, unguarded you, and love you not for how well you hide, but for how bravely you've chosen to be seen. So when the cracks appear, don't rush to cover them. Let them breathe. Let them widen, because breaking doesn't mean you're ruined. It means the performance is over. It's the moment you stop auditioning for love and start belonging, not to someone else, but to yourself. The mask protected you once, but now you no longer need it. You have something stronger, your truth. There comes a moment in healing when everything grows quiet, not the numb quiet of suppression, but the stillness that comes from finally understanding. The noise of old fear begins to fade, not because it's gone, but because you've learned how to listen to it differently. You stop trying to erase the past or silence the echoes. Instead, you sit with them. The reflexes are still there, the urge to shrink, to stay small, to keep the peace. But you begin to recognize them for what they are. Not signs of weakness, but evidence of survival. Every flinch, every pause, every careful breath was once your body's way of keeping you safe. And that realization changes everything. For a long time, I mistook silence for strength. I thought that if I could stay composed, if I could contain everything, I'd finally be free from it. But control is not freedom, it's fear disguised as order. True calm isn't something you perform, it's something that grows when you stop fighting yourself. Dr. Richard Schwartz, founder of internal family systems therapy, calls this reclaiming the exiled parts of the self, the parts we buried to survive. The lost child in me was one of those exiles. She wasn't weak or broken, she was quiet because no one listened. And when I finally did, when I stopped silencing her, I discovered something unexpected. What I thought was emptiness was actually empathy. What I called fragility was sensitivity, and what I mistook for isolation was quiet strength. None of it needed fixing, only witnessing. That's what healing really is. Not erasing fear, but staying when it returns. It's walking into a room and feeling the old panic rise, yet choosing to remain. It's hearing the voice that says, "Don't draw attention," and replying, "I'm allowed to be here." It's an act of quiet rebellion, not against others, but against the outdated rules that once defined love and safety. And when you can do that, stay present through the discomfort, that's when strength begins to feel different. It's no longer about holding everything in, but about trusting yourself enough to stay, even when it hurts. Dr. Peter Levine once wrote, "Trauma is what we hold inside in the absence of an empathetic witness." For years, I waited for that witness to arrive, someone who could finally understand the parts I'd hidden. But the truth is, the witness had to be me. The moment I stopped turning away from my own pain, I became that presence I'd been searching for. I began to listen without judgment, to stay when my body wanted to flee, to tell the frightened child within, "You're not alone anymore." The lost child didn't vanish, she transformed. She became my compass, guiding me not toward perfection, but toward presence. And then, quietly, the shift happens. There's no dramatic breakthrough, no grand epiphany, just a subtle lightness. You realize you're no longer performing calm, you're living it. You speak without rehearsing. You rest without guilt. You feel love without fear of losing yourself in it. The silence that once hid your pain now holds your peace. In that stillness, you finally understand. You were never truly lost. You were waiting for the moment you could meet yourself again, with gentleness instead of shame, waiting to whisper to the child who carried it all, "You don't have to protect me anymore. I'm here now. You're safe." That is what it means to come home, not to the house you grew up in, but to the self you left behind. The lost child isn't gone, they are finally seen, and for the first time, so are you. There comes a time when invisibility stops feeling safe, when silence no longer protects you, it just isolates you. For so long we believed that being unseen was a kind of peace. We learnt to fade out of rooms, out of conversations, even out of ourselves. But there's a quiet ache that builds over the years, a longing not just to exist, but to be felt. That's where the shift begins. Not all at once, not in dramatic awakenings, but in small, almost invisible moments, when you catch yourself wanting more than survival. For many of us, that realization comes in stillness. You're sitting in your car after work, staring at the steering wheel, feeling both empty and full of everything you never said, and empty from carrying it alone. You start to wonder if this constant self-control is what being okay is supposed to feel like. That question, what if I want more than okay, is the first crack in the old armor. Because you start to sense that invisibility isn't peace. It's distance from life, from connection, from the person you were meant to become. What's strange is how deeply we cling to invisibility even after we see its cost. It feels safer to keep pretending, to stay small, to keep the peace by staying quiet. But every time we hide, something inside us grows restless. Dr. Harriet Lerner, a pioneer in relationship psychology, once said, "Anxiety is the price we pay for moving toward growth." That restlessness, you feel the anxiety, the unease. It isn't a sign you're failing. It's proof you're evolving. Your mind is resisting the old scripts. Your heart is testing the walls of a smaller life. This stage is hard because it doesn't look like transformation. It looks like confusion. You start speaking up and feel guilt. You set boundaries and feel selfish. You show emotion and feel exposed. Every step toward visibility feels like walking without skin. That's the paradox. The more real you become, the more raw you feel. But rawness is where authenticity begins. It's where you stop performing calm and start living honestly. And slowly you begin to see traces of yourself returning in laughter that isn't forced, in tears that come without shame, in the way your body relaxes when you no longer have to pretend. You realize you don't need to be perfect to be seen. You just need to be present. Presence, even shaky, uncertain, imperfect, is what begins to fill the emptiness that silence left behind. There's a moment in this journey when you look in the mirror and recognize yourself again, not the version molded by fear or approval, but the one who's been waiting underneath. You see strength where you once saw fragility. You see softness as power. You see that visibility isn't arrogance. It's belonging, not to others, but to yourself. Maybe that's what it means to become whole, to let the invisible child and the visible adult finally meet, to stop apologizing for being too quiet, too emotional, too much, to stand in your truth and say, I am here. I have always been here. The world may not applaud this moment, but your soul will. Because this isn't the end of the story. It's the beginning of being seen, fully and finally, by the one person who always needed to see you most. You. If any part of this story felt familiar, take a breath. You're not alone in it. When was the first time you learned that being quiet made you feel safe? Write a single sentence to that younger version of you in the comments. I'll read every one. And if this helps you feel seen, stay. There's more to learn, more to heal, and more of you waiting to be found. Because maybe, as we write to the children we once were, we're really teaching ourselves how to come home.